Hello everyone, Storm11 here. Today we'll be having an update where we're going to see multiple storm systems come out of the Rockies. It could bring in multiple severe weather risks beginning Friday, and it could go into the middle of next week, and it'd be happening over a large, area as well. Before you get started in this video, if you guys like weather-related content, you can subscribe to my channel. We do this stuff here all the time on this channel. Plus, we'll have more updates on this topic here over the next couple days. So definitely stay tuned for more updates as well. We're going to get started with the watch warning advisory display. There is some activity out there. Uh, we got red flag warnings over parts of Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, back down into parts of the four quarter states. And we got freeze warnings and frost advisories for parts of the Midwest into parts of the Ohio Valley. We even had some severe weather that occurred in southeastern Virginia, even into east central and eastern North Carolina as well, which these are the storm reports so far today. We only have one tornado report, and that was in the kind of in the northwestern part of Virginia, more likely a brief tornado, but we had 53 wind reports and 13 hail reports. And this was all by a line of thunderstorms that rode, well, it was mostly a broken line, but a broken line of thunderstorms that rode through parts of central North Carolina up into Virginia, which they are still going in the eastern part of North Carolina into southeastern Virginia. And they should eventually get offshore here over the next couple hours, and eventually the severe weather threat will be done. Which this is the SPC outlook for the rest of today. Slight risk in southeast central Virginia, with a margin risk that extends all the way down into southeastern Georgia. No tornado risk for the rest of the day, but damage winds would be the main threat. There could be some hail from some of those storms as well. Day 2, which is tomorrow, we got a margin risk for parts of the Texas Panhandle and in the Oklahoma Panhandle. Even for western Kansas, parts of southern Nebraska, southeastern Colorado, into northeastern New Mexico. Hopefully these guys could get some rain out of this, because they could really use some rain here. So the threats for some of these thunderstorms, or from some of the strongest severe thunderstorms, is wind and hail, which is looking to be your main threats. Tornadoes are not expected. Then on day 3, which is Thursday, got a margin risk for western Oklahoma, southern Kansas, into for a few areas in northern Texas. On day 4, which is Friday, we got a slight risk for severe weather in southeastern Nebraska, eastern Kansas into eastern Oklahoma, parts of northern Texas, northwestern Arkansas, and far western Missouri as well. This is looking to be a pretty good setup for severe weather over some of these areas as well. It seems like it did trend a little faster as well, so it kind of shifted to the east a little bit as well. But so far, days 5 through 8 is predictably too low, but that could change over the next couple of days. So we're going to get started with Friday's severe weather setup, and the NAM is in range for Friday, and this is the supercell composite here. And you can see here the numbers are not very impressive, and usually the NAM is pretty conservative in its first couple runs of an upcoming setup here, but it could uptrend over the next couple of days or so as we kind of get closer to the event. And that's kind of typical for the NAM of what it does there. But regardless here, you do see some decent numbers out here. You got as high as a 6 in the parts of Oklahoma and Kansas. But let's check out some of the other ingredients, like how much instability we got out there. Well, there is going to be a decent amount of instability out there, especially along the dry line. Along the dry line here, we actually got instability values up to 3,000 joules per kilogram. So, lots of instability along the dry line here. And there's also a decent amount of instability across parts of Kansas, Missouri, southeastern Nebraska, even into southwestern Iowa. But a lot of that stuff is capped at that point, which the cap could break into the overnight hours as well for some areas anyway. 850 millibar winds, you got a decent load of a jet over the areas, generally 30 to 40, maybe even as high as 50 knots out there. It's not a ridiculously strong low of a jet, but it is enough to create some severe weather issues. And if you go a little bit higher, up to 500 millibars, you do have a kind of almost a negatively tilted trough in place here. And there's also, the winds are not very strong in the upper levels, which is an indication that there's going to be a lot of lift for these storms out there. So the lift is going to be very strong there, and that can help support the significant hail threat out there, especially given the fact you got pretty good instability values out there as well. And if we go back to the supercell composite here and get a sounding here, let's get a sounding kind of along the Kansas and Oklahoma border here. And we'll just look at one sounding for this event here because some of the other areas will be similar. And you can see here, plenty wind shear. Rate of helicity values are generally 200 to 400, which is favorable. Plenty of instability, of course. Surface space is 3,200. Mixed layer cape is 2,500. And there is some wind direction of height at the surface here, which, if you can see right here, winds at the surface are out from the south. But if you're close to 850 millibars, they're actually from the southwest. So there is some wind direction of height going on here. You got a decent hodograph as well. Downdraft cape is pretty strong, 1400. That's pretty high for downdraft cape. And there's also the lap rates are pretty elevated as well. Now, one issue here is that you got a cap in place, and that's something we got to watch for. And that's been a very common scenario for the past several severe weather setups in the plains. Is the dry air in the cap, which what's been going on for most of the time here, and a lot of the models have been underestimating the convection of how it builds up. So could happen again. Yeah, it certainly could, but it's not 100% guaranteed. It's because it could change. But regardless here, if this cap does break here, we could see some significant severe weather. And I think the significant side of things is going to come from hail. Although there could be some damaging winds, and also there will be a tornado threat out there as well. One issue here, though, for the tornado threat is that the LFC and the LCL is pretty spread apart there, which can help limit the tornado potential as well, which for the previous severe weather setups, these haven't been big tornadoes or anything like that, even though we got strong wind shear out there. And I think that scenario could happen again um, with this upcoming severe weather setup if trends do continue. Not all models are in range just yet. If we check out the GFS model here for the same day, this is surface-based cape. Pretty similar to the NAM model. Instability values at least 3,000 joules per kilogram. It's also got some areas almost to 4,000 out there as well. 500 millibar winds out there. Very similar to the NAM model. Got a negatively tilt trough in place. 850 millibar winds. You got a pretty decent low of a jet in place. See if there's anything else we can look at. It doesn't look like there's much of anything else we could look into here. But if we check out the supercell composite here, numbers are actually a little bit higher than the NAM. Some of you don't see very often here, numbers from GFS being higher than the NAM. But really, generally it's a 4 to a 6 out there when it comes to supercell composite numbers. If we get a sounding in northern Oklahoma and see what the GFS suggests. And you know what? It's actually similar to the NAM mode, but with more instability. Check out the instability values in the bottom left corner here, the sounding here. Right here. Surface-based cape is 4,500 and mixed layer cape is up to 3,200. That's a lot of instability. That's an indication that the atmosphere is going to be pretty unstable. But then again, similar scenario to the NAM model. You got a cap in place, some dry air, and the LFC and the LCL height are pretty far from each other as well. And that's going to help limit the tornado potential. Plus, the hodograph size is not very large there, but it can still support a tornado threat. And even wind shear values can even support a tornado threat as well. But if we don't, regardless if we see tornadoes or not, you'll still have a threat for damaging winds and significant hail. Hail will probably be my primary concern on the setup here because the atmosphere is going to be very unstable and the lift is just going to be pretty darn strong out there as well. I mean, look at the lap rates there. It's pretty elevated. And then again, downdraft cape is also pretty elevated as well. 1,500. That's pretty high. That's going to support damage winds out there as well. So really my primary concern here for Friday, severe weather setup, especially within supercells, you're going to see significant hail out of some of these storms and damaging winds. Now, tornado threat is still a little bit uncertain here. You still got several factors that can limit the tornado potential, but I think it could still be there, regardless of some of those limiting factors out there as well. So, but regardless here, Friday definitely looks like a significant severe weather setup to me. Pretty much mainly on the hail side, maybe not so much for damage wind in the tornado side. I think this could definitely be a big time hail driven event here. If trends do continue, things could still change over the next day or two. And let's kind of continue on with the GFS ball here, and let's move into Saturday. And it shifts further to the east here. In the focus, in my opinion, here, it's going to be over parts of Illinois and Missouri, which we do have some decent supersonic composite values out there. It also does kind of extend to parts of Kentucky and Indiana, but wind shear side of things are a little bit weaker as you get further to the east there. It also should be noted here, if we actually look at this a little bit more detail, here's instability here. There's a possibility that the wind shear or the low of a jet might be a little bit displaced from the instability, just a little bit. And that can lead to some uncertainty here of the setup here. But let's go ahead and highlight this here. This is at least 1,000 plus joules per kilogram, which is favorable for severe weather. And you kind of put in the low of a jet in place here, at least along the front anyway, which our front is right here. The strongest low of a jet is a little bit displaced there from the front. So we'll have to wait and see if any storms do develop out ahead of the main cold front, because if it does, there might be a possibility for some supercells out there as well. And that kind of depends on how much wind shear that we still have here. But the low of a jet on this day here will probably be a little bit weaker than Friday's severe weather setup. And here's a look at 500 millibar winds. There's quite a bit of divergence out there, especially when you get down to parts of Indiana and Kentucky. A lot of divergence out there, which leads to a lot of lift out there. But really, the main area to watch for would be parts of Illinois and Missouri out there. That's where some of the greatest wind shear content could be located anyway. And that's also where we're going to see that lift mechanism, and that's that cold front out there. If we go back to supersonic composite here and get a sound here near St. Louis, Missouri, and see what it suggests out there. And you can see here, closer to the frontier a little bit, the wind shear values are just not very impressive at all. The storage to felicity values are below 150, which in my opinion, that's the threshold for some severe weather. Well, we're below 150 out there, which is some values, they're kind of around 100 generally. And that's really going to limit the tornado potential. But still doesn't necessarily mean that there's no severe weather risk. You still got plenty of instability out there. Surface-based, that's dead on 3,000 right there. When it comes to surface-based, and mixed layer CAPE is 1,600. And low-level lap rates is also a little on the stronger side, as when mid-level lap rates are not terrible either. Plus, downdraft CAPE is a little over 800 as well, which is favorable for damage winds as well. So really the main threat in the sounding here will be strong winds and even some hail out there as well. Now, there is still plenty of time for changes here. You know, we're still a couple days away from this event here. We'll have to wait and see whenever the convection allowing models kind of get in range for that setup as well. And then you move on to, let's see here, I believe it's Sunday. Yes, Sunday. Severe weather risk does push a little bit further to the east here. Now, there's still a lot of uncertainty as you do get into Sunday here. Some models suggest that it's not really going to be a good severe weather setup. Some other ones are a little bit better, which GFS, at least for the latest run anyway, it's kind of one of the better ones out there when it comes to severe weather. As high as a 5 around the tri-state area. But then again, still plenty of time here for changes out there. But at the same time here, if you go back a little bit to the west here, you're starting to see some supersonic composite values begin to increase back into parts of Texas as well. And that's going to be ahead of another storm system out there, which you can see here about the wind bars, looks like there could be another low out here, and that could lead to some severe weather potential in the warm sector as well. And you notice here, the cold front doesn't really go that far south here. It's kind of staying as a stationary front for a little bit, but there could be some that potential for severe weather as you get into Monday, especially over parts of the lower Ohio Valley and the Tennessee Valley, and possibly back into the Texarkana region. It all depends on how much winter there could be out there. And then on Tuesday here, maybe that severe weather risk could continue into the mid-Atlantic. And then continuing on a little bit further here, severe weather risk may be possible back into the plains again, and that kind of repeats itself as well. And then you get a Wednesday of next week. Now it's more focused over the Tennessee Valley and Lower Ohio Valley, and even parts of Dixie Valley as well, which Dixie Valley hasn't seen a big severe weather setup in a hot minute. And that could continue a little bit further east after that as well. So what this kind of tells us? Well, the pattern is going to become much more active. But let's look into some other models first, or more models, I should say. This is a GFS ensemble here. This is a probability for energy helicity index, and this is basically a combination of instability and the storm relative helicity. Kind of similar to the superset composite here, but this is kind of a probability, and this is a probability for at least a level 1 on the energy helicity index, which is kind of on the lower end, but this is kind of the best I got here. But it's also kind of similar to the superset composite parameters as well. So let's kind of look into this, and I consider at least a 50% as a pretty good probability, especially when you get at least above a 70, which this is back on Friday. Pretty high numbers out there, which that means conditions will likely be pretty favorable for severe weather, especially when you got that combination of instability and wind shear out there. And then you kind of move into Saturday, numbers do begin to back off a little bit. But the numbers are still elevated out there, especially when you get into those green and yellow colors out there. That is an indication that conditions can be favorable for some severe weather in some of these areas, as well as that combination of instability and wind shear. Instability values likely be elevated, but I still have some questions about the wind shear, as well. Like we've seen from the GFS, the wind shear values were pretty low out there, but it's definitely someone to watch there. When you see where models trend. You remember, like I was saying here, when we get to Sunday here, where the GFS had superset composite parameters as high as a 6 around the tri-state. Well, look at the probabilities for at least a 1 for energy helicity index for GFS ensembles. Much lower than some of the previous days here, about 10 to 20%. So that's an indication that there's a lot of absurdity out there, but the potential could still be there, but the confidence level is just low. So you get into Sunday. And you get into Monday, the focus is back in the plains here over parts of Oklahoma and Texas. And that could continue into Tuesday. Eventually, when you get into Wednesday here, it finally kind of gets pushed a little bit further to the east here. That's for the next system as well. And this is where uncertainty really becomes a little bit higher as well. And this is pretty typical as you get farther out here. Where we are at this point here, a little bit over a week out. But there's still some decent probabilities out there. I mean, close to 50%. It's not a bad probability this far out from the GFS ensembles. And then here's Thursday out there, and really the confidence just is flat out pretty low out there. But then again, GFS ensembles does have an indication that we got an active pattern coming up as well, especially when it comes to severe weather. I mean, pretty much beginning Friday into Saturday, Sunday, Monday, next Tuesday, and eventually into next Wednesday may feature a severe weather setup somewhere in the country. If it's going to be in the plains or in parts of the Midwest and the Mississippi River Valley, or it could be in the parts of the Ohio Valley and the Tennessee Valley. If it's an area I will really watch for severe weather beginning Friday into the middle of next week, it will probably have to be in this area right in here. in that red circle right there. That's the area I will focus on for severe weather potential. And some of these areas could see multiple severe weather sets. It may not just be one, it could be two or three or maybe more. We'll just have to wait and see about that. Let's check out another model. Let's check out the European model. And this is beginning back on Friday, a 991 millibar low in parts of southern Kansas. Not much development happening out there, and that may be due to the cap in place. But really, overall, European model kind of shows a bust scenario. Cap is too strong, maybe too much dry air, nothing develops. That could potentially be your bust scenario. What's interesting here at this point here, so we kind of get a little bit deeper to Saturday here, you kind of get a stationary front that sets up right here across the Midwest down to the lower Ohio Valley. This could lead to showers of thunderstorms kind of a northwest flow as well, and that could potentially lead to some minor flooding problems as well, depending on how much moisture we got in the atmosphere out there as well. But here, as you get into Saturday here, almost a triple point setup out here. But then again, wind shear values are not very impressive out there, despite of having a triple point top of setup there. But still something to really watch for, though, over the next couple days here. But even getting into overnight hours, there's still some decent thunderstorms out there. So you get in the overnight hours as well. At the same time, our cutoff low really becomes weaker as well. It also may still have some snow behind it as well. On the backside of the low could still contain some snow. And then on Sunday here, severe weather risk maybe a little bit more focused in the parts of the Ohio Valley, but you can see here from the European model standpoint, the low is not very strong at all. Wind shear may be too weak for severe weather. But the severe weather threat kind of shifts back to the west over parts of the plains, which in this case here, the European model does suggest thunderstorms developing over parts of Oklahoma and Texas. It even showed a little MCS right there in northern Texas out there, which is interesting. And you can see here as we get into Monday here, severe weather risk could be pushed a little bit further to the east out there. You kind of get some of these multiple cluster thunderstorms that may roll through as well. And some of those may have the potential to be strong to severe as well. Here's that low developing along that stationary front. And that severe weather risk could continue in the parts of the mid-Atlantic by Tuesday. And then here we go again, back to the west. Here comes another system coming out of the Rockies again for like the fourth time or so. And you can see here now, if the European model is correct, this could be a big setup here for severe weather, but the agreement's not very strong. But anyway, if the European model is correct by Wednesday, could be a pretty decent severe weather event for parts of the Midwest. You got a strong 995 millibar low in parts of South Dakota. Got some snow on the backside of the system, which is dynamic cooling for the system. And you got this triple point setup again over parts of the Midwest. And you can see here that may continue a little bit further east, especially in overnight hours in the parts of the Ohio Valley. And then by Thursday, that risk could continue into the Mid-Atlantic. But then again, that's pretty far out, about 7 to 10 days out. That could change as well. And here's the European samples. Now, this is the mean for rainfall amounts, and we're going all the way till the middle of May here. And you can see here, at least 2 inches of rain is certainly an indication for an active pattern here, especially if you get in the 3 to 4 inch range as well. You can see here, it covers a large area here. It really does here. But you can also tell here you might also have some northwest flow setups as well, so you kind of have a little streak that goes on out there. And you also got a little streak that could go on out here as well, where that stationary front could become a little bit more stationary as well, and some lows could develop along that front as well towards early next week. But regardless, this is an indication that there is going to be a very active pattern, and some of these lows could bring in severe weather risks as well. So wherever we get to later this weekend into early May, or in other words, early next week, expect to be pretty busy, especially if you're in parts of the Southern Plains, Midwest, Ohio Valley, maybe in the parts of the Mid-Atlantic, even as far south as parts of Tennessee Valley. If you do live in these areas, definitely keep an eye on the forecast over the next couple of days. But anyways, guys, that's all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Guys, like this video, hit that like button. If you do like my channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. If you got some questions about this, put a comment section down below. Alright, you guys questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.